And we continue at 2:05 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, we've got two competing theories from the mailbag as to why there has been so much crime in Lafayette lately. Let's start with this email. The robberies in Lafayette are within close proximity to the BART station, and it's the avenue they take to go back to Oakland.
Okay, that would make sense.
Kat writes in and says, the police station is 3 blocks from the candy store. Also, they have license plate readers everywhere because Lafayette is next to Highway 24, which leads quickly to the tunnel that leads to Oakland.
I'm noticing a theme here.
It's a lot of crime now.
800-222-5222 is a telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, we have an idea as to what happened with the fires in Southern California that raged across the Southland this January. We know that the fire in Altadena, the alleged cause of that was the power company, Southern California Edison. For a long time, we had no clue what started the fire in Pacific Palisades. Now, investigators say they believe the cause was arson, that the fire started originally intentionally by a man who was an Uber driver who went off on women for not wanting to have sex with him and Donald Trump in the car. And then he left the car after dropping off his passenger and started the fire. Then the fire was extinguished, but not fully, according to the theory. And then the fire reignited around the time that the Pacific Palisades was set ablaze. Now, with all of this information that we have, we're trying to figure out, okay, what were the various points of failure so we don't do this again? Now, News Nation is saying, well, the LAFD may have had a handle on it if it weren't for the state and Gavin Newsom futzing it up.
It's very possible, according to new reports, that the LAFD was hindered in their ability to put out the fire because it was on state land and state park employees had an issue with them bringing in dozers.
Good Lord.
For more on this, we go to an investigative piece from News Nation.
Survivors of the deadly Palisades fire in Southern California don't just want answers, they want heads to roll. January will mark 1 year since the fire ripped through the tight-knit coastal community. Residents say they are no closer to anyone taking responsibility for the alleged missteps that led to the widespread devastation. Several survivors spoke yesterday at a field hearing organized by Senators Rick Scott and Ron Johnson. Reality TV star Spencer Pratt has...
He's really become the face of the plight of the Palisades.
Well, we need someone to do it because it's certainly not Karen Bass.
Reality TV star Spencer Pratt has become an outspoken voice in the fight for accountability. He got emotional recounting the day he lost his home.
By the grace of God, my family survived. The 12, the Palisades family were killed in the fire. Nearly all of them elderly or disabled, left to die in their homes. These 12 people deserved to feel safe in their homes, but were instead lost in fire that was a direct result of gross negligence and mismanagement by our state and our local government.
The state of California, LA County.
And by the way, while he's out there doing the work that the government refuses to do, Newsom is sending his online team of jackals to attack this guy at every turn.
The state of California, LA County, and the LA Fire Department have spent the last several months blaming each other for what happened.
Yep.
And ultimately, who they blame is Donald Trump, because that's the fault of all bad things that happen in California. That is the default position.
News Nation's investigative correspondent Rich McHugh has spent those months investigating which of those might be at fault. And his latest report might get us closer to an answer.
Hi, Elizabeth. According to the ATF, the Palisades fire began on state land. The state says it was not the responsibility to monitor or respond to it. The lead attorney against the state says the state's dead wrong and he has the receipts to prove it. Furthermore, says that the state may have interfered with the Los Angeles Fire Department mop-up.
That's not good.
No, it's not. And Gavin Newsom loves to blame everyone other than Gavin Newsom, but it looks like his team, his people, were the ones that got in the way of the local authorities from fully extinguishing this fire and solving the problem.
Well, and it wouldn't be too surprising. Again, the soothsayer she was, Shang illustrated this many years ago.
The bureaucracy is real.
Let's not forget why the reservoir, the Santa Ynez Reservoir, was empty to begin with. Because the state said, oh, there's something with the lid. You need to drain it, and then we need to fix it. And then that just never happened.
And for the politicians, because they spend all of their time on federal issues, opining about what's going on in Washington, D.C., or attacking Donald Trump, or participating in online harassment, they're not doing their day job. This is the day job. You're supposed to make sure that state lands are taken care of if you're the state. You're supposed to make sure that the LAFD has all the relevant resources and information if you're the mayor. And they're not doing that. They're spending their time acting like trolls online.
This is the start of the Palisades fire, what would become the worst in LA's history, taking 12 lives and over 6,800 structures. Federal officials say it all began on January 1st when an arsonist started the Lockman fire. The Lockman fire was thought to be extinguished, but underground...
Well, except for all of the LAFD crew that were on the scene that were texting management, hey, this thing's not out. Are you really sure we got to go?
What's awful about this is that the on-the-line firefighters are going to be the ones that take it on the chin. But they were the ones telling the truth.
But
it was the politicians and the management that screwed this up. But the on-the-line firefighters knew that fire wasn't fully extinguished, and they told their bosses that.
But the question that I always had was why? Like, why would management of the LAFD... It's not like, I know the budget's tight and I know they got to go to homeless fires, but if they're already on the scene, why wouldn't you put someone there out to monitor it? It's very possible the reason management said wrap this thing up is because the state parks people are like, this is our land. We don't want you futzing with these trees.
Who knows the reason behind them telling the firefighters to move on to other things? The only relevant information here is that the firefighters gave them truthful information and they willfully decided to go against that for whatever reason that motivated them to do it.
But underground embers reignited 6 days later, starting a second, more devastating fire, the Palisades fire, and with it, a storm of controversy. Governor Gavin Newsom this week pointing to climate change.
That is so pathetic. Instead of blaming your own incompetence and the incompetence of the mayor of Los Angeles and the leadership in Los Angeles, you're blaming this existential threat.
We're on the tip of the spear of climate change, simultaneous droughts and simultaneous floods. The hots are getting a lot hotter, the dries drier. You saw one of the most devastating wildfires in American history in the middle of winter in Los Angeles.
And how did climate change empty the reservoir and make the hydrants not work?
This is like when there's an earthquake and someone said, it's because they let lesbians get married. This is God punishing us. That's the reason why we were leveled with an earthquake. The same logic is being used here that the televangelists use when they blame the earthquake on the lesbians. He is not taking responsibility for any of the missteps in his office. We know it was an Uber driver with Trump derangement syndrome that started the fire, and we know that it was a political decision from the city of Los Angeles to have the firefighters move on from the fire after they were told it wasn't fully put out. That's the reason the Palisades burned down, right there.
But that's not what his spokesperson tells News Nation in response to a lawsuit from over 3,000 Palisades residents alleging the state failed to monitor embers from the initial fire. They said the state didn't start this fire. That was an arsonist, and the state wasn't responsible for responding to or monitoring this fire. But
I had nothing to do with it.
I mean, you can't blame the state for the ignition of the fire, but everything else, maybe, yeah.
But the lead attorney representing the Palisades family says Governor Newsom is wrong, that the state's own guidelines prove the state was responsible.
It says where a wildfire burns on state park land, the state must close the land until a state park representative had gone up and determined that there are no further hazards to the public.
Did that happen?
Gavin?
Did they close the park?
They did not. People were able to hike up through there.
In fact, there were people hiking and taking videos of the smoldering rocks.
Gavin?
While the embers in the hillside remained active.
On January 1st, a hiker took this video of the fire smoldering. The next day, a different hiker also captured the fire smoldering. But the most damning, Bailey says, is that there was a state park representative interfering with the Los Angeles Fire Department mop-up.
Wait, what?
Gavin?
Days before the Palisades fire ignited.
We have reports of a state park representative coming up to the area of the Lockman burn scar with a map and directing firefighters what they could touch and not touch. They could bulldoze, not bulldoze.
Uh-oh.
You got to be kidding me. A Richard measuring contest was what forced these firefighters from putting the fire out between the state and the city?
Is it possible that the most devastating fire in Los Angeles history sparked because the state was trying to protect a tree?
Well, and it was a fight over turf. Who knows what their motivation was, whether it was protecting a tree or whatever. This belongs to us. Don't touch it.
So wait, you're saying that they were
Fighting our turf.
Pretty much.
And directing firefighters what they could touch and not touch. They could bulldoze, not bulldoze. We know that occurred on January 2nd.
Is this
This is starting to make a little more sense.
It is. And again, instead of the politicians being actively engaged in all of this, they're spending their time on Twitter attacking Trump. They have no interest in their day job. Zero interest. Not Newsom, not Bass, none of them. They all want to be members of the Senate or president or cable news talking heads. They don't want to do the job that they were elected to do. Well, guess what? You can choose not to participate in your daily duties, but the daily duties still need to be done. And if you're not doing them, then we have absentee landlords. And when there's a power vacuum, people step up and take it. Whether it is the chief of staff who's now being charged with federal crimes, or it's Ranger Rick over in the park who decides that he's in charge here and he's going to tell the firefighters where they can and can't extinguish flames. This is nuts.
Occurred on January 2nd.
Is this people that you've spoken to or you've talked to that said they saw this?
Yeah, people that were present at the Lockman burn scar on the 2nd of January saw a state park rep with a map up in the area telling firefighters what they could do and not do in that area.
911 calls continue.
You think you'd defer to the firefighters for that because their job is to literally put out the fire.
That climate change really is a bitch. Climate change came down in the form of a ranger with a map barking orders at the firefighters.
911 calls continued. Call logs show that the next day, on January 3rd, a caller reported seeing wisps of smoke.
And other people said, hey, look, we're still seeing smoke up there.
There you go.
And it's not just the callers. It's not just the people in the neighborhood. That was what they were hearing from their own firefighters. Their own firefighters were telling them that. Think about how we run shop here in California, where we have police officers where the electeds fundamentally do not want them to do their job. They think that we have too many people incarcerated, so they don't want you to arrest anyone when they break the law. How do you think you would feel if you were a police officer where you know your bosses fundamentally don't want you to do your job? And it's not just them. The firefighters are experiencing the same thing. They're there working their tails off, trying to put a fire out. And They're working day and night, and they recognize that the fire isn't fully extinguished, and they tell that to management. They tell management, and management says, who cares? Move on. The state says that's their land. They don't want you touching it. How insane are we that we allowed this to happen? Ultimately, the voters are responsible, because at no point did Gavin Newsom show any interest in running the state. At no point did Karen Bass show any interest in running the city of Los Angeles. They ran as politically ambitious partisans who care about federal issues. She spends all of her time talking about immigration and Trump. Newsom spends all of his time talking about Trump, immigration, Florida, and Texas. Why aren't you spending your time talking about the fires? In theory, they should look at the failures that took place here and say, you know what? We deserve the criticism here because the government didn't protect the people of the Palisades or Altadena when they should have, and they had the relevant information at the time, and for whatever reason, they chose not to. But we're going to set up a blue ribbon commission to make sure that this never happens again. And we're going to learn everything that we can learn from the failures of this fire to make sure it's never repeated in California, because we know we live in a state where there is extreme fire risk. Have you heard anything like that come out of Newsom's office or Bass's office? No, because they're blaming climate change. Because if you blame climate change, that is a global existential threat that you have no control over, which means you can't be blamed. Which also means the next time this happens, we're going to repeat all of the same mistakes, which is part of the reason that none of us can buy insurance. If the insurance companies were convinced that the state of California could competently fight fires and reduce the risk of homes burning to the ground, then maybe we could buy insurance. But we can't buy insurance because it's not just us that's hearing these stories. So are the insurance companies. And insurance fundamentally is a game of risk. Would you look at this story and these leaders and say that you have confidence in their ability to competently fight a fire the next time? No. No, we're all in trouble the next time it's windy and there's a fire. These people learn nothing from their failures. Nothing. The fact that the public isn't disgusted with all of them is beyond my ability to comprehend. Let's go to Dana in Huntington Beach. Dana, hello.
Good afternoon, fellas. I distinctly remember several days after the fire ignited in the Palisades, and it came to light that the big reservoir was empty. A DWP employee was interviewed and said that could have been an in-house fix without emptying the reservoir on that torn floating cover that the state was worried about. And all of a sudden, that's the last you heard of it. They about to put kibosh on him. It never came to light again, to my knowledge. And
well, certainly that would be consistent with what we learned from the fight between the state and the locals, where you had the park ranger out there with the map telling the city firefighters to stop fighting the fire on certain portions of the land because that belonged to the state and they were in charge, and the city doesn't call the shots over there. It seems like ticky-tack regulations and tribal conflicts certainly motivated their decision-making more than making sure that everyone was safe and protected. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the founder of Neighbors Together Oakland and the host of the Gotham Oakland podcast, which you can watch and listen to on YouTube. You can follow him on X at Seneca Speaks 21. Seneca Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Sean, for having me back. Good to hear from you.
So, Seneca, we learned last night that the Attorney General of California, the former assemblyman representing Oakland, who has long been tied to the Dong family and to California Waste Solutions, spent just under $500,000 on a law firm that specializes in white-collar crime. He said he spent the money on the law firm to aid the feds in their investigation against Cal Waste Solutions and former Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao, and has been hiding that information for quite some time. It wasn't revealed until yesterday that he spent the money. However, the spending started right around the same time that he admitted, or he came out and publicly stated, that he would not be running for governor, something many people were expecting him to do. None of this makes any sense. No one knows more about the investigation about former Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao than you do. In the context of all the knowledge you've acquired in covering Sheng Tao and covering all of the indiscretions going on in the East Bay, does this pass the smell test to you?
Not at all, and I've got something to say. So let me know when you're ready, John, because I've got a lot of information for you. And
right
everyone
ahead.
out there in California listening. Okay, so let me start at the beginning of this story. Then Kyle wanted to run for Leah Bonta's position. And they made a deal with the Bontas that they would support her for mayor in return for Shin Kyle standing down and not running for the assembly position. So that's where this starts at. Now, here's what you should know. You need to take a closer look at the key players who back Shin Kyle. One of her strongest supporters was Latifah Simon, a longtime ally and protege of Kamala Harris, who even works. Latifah's our current councilwoman. Kamala Harris is our former vice president. And she even worked under her at the San Francisco DA to launch the entry program. And now, guess who Shin Kao's lawyer is? A gentleman named Jeffrey Tsai. He was the top political aide to Harris during her time as the California Attorney General, advising him on criminal justice and enforcement issues. He's also a managing partner at DLA Piper, the same firm where Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, was partner before becoming second gentleman. Just a coincidence? It's kind of hard to ignore. And now they're just burned through $500 million paying a top firm connected to the bribery case. Who's paying Jeffrey Tsai? Since how's broke? Who's paying him? Where are they getting paid from? Also, when you look at the frequent connections to the Duong family, for example, Rob Bonta requested a $3.4 million grant for a company called Veritas Fuels. This is all exposed by Susan Dyer Reynolds and the Voice of San Francisco. Check her out. It's that company that he requested the grant for was run by Mario Juarez, who was the alleged whistleblower, who's also linked to Bonta's wife. Now, I'm not going to deep dive into this one because this is quite a rabbit hole, but you should go check that out. There's more than one involvement with the Duong family and Mario Juarez, who, again, is the likely whistleblower who's taken down the Duong family and Oakland's former mayor, Shin Kyle. And so you mentioned that the story doesn't add up. It's also potentially illegal. The authority, the attorney general of the seventh largest economy in the world, the most prosperous state of the country, and you're telling me he had to supplement his budget with off the books $500K for a law firm that's not even legally able to investigate? That's not you can't do that. It seems really inappropriate to pay an outside law firm from their own personal campaign account to, quote, help investigate the wrongdoings in a bribery investigation of Shin Kyle when Bonta himself received $155,000 in donations from this family in the past. Now, granted, Rob Bonta gave back those donations the moment they were charged, but none of this is making any sense. What do you think, John?
Yeah, none of it makes sense to me either. And I want to put this in the context of a claim that not just Sheng Tao, but her attorneys have made repeatedly. And they've been consistent about this, and they seem pretty earnest about it. I actually believe them when they say this. Sheng Tao said the feds told her that she was not the target of the investigation. And she said that consistently. The same thing with her representation. I believe her when she says that. I don't believe that she was the target of the investigation. You and I have had this conversation before in the past, and I've had this conversation with other people who are following this closely as well, and they all seem to believe that she's being truthful when she says that. And the speculation, and that's all we can do because only the feds know for sure, is that there's a bigger fish that they were looking at, and they saw indiscretions coming from Chang and people in her orbit, and they had to blow the whistle because it was right in front of their face, and she wasn't being particularly discreet about it. But if there is a bigger fish, then it's possible that Rob Bonta could be that fish. It's possible that it could be someone else, but it's certainly possible, Seneca, it could be him.
It's absolutely possible. I would say that to take $500,000 to supplement corruption when there's so much corruption in California, why not investigate those fire donations from nonprofits that were formed while the fires were still raging, that received hundreds of millions of dollars that didn't end up going to help anybody? There's a plethora of potential corruption to investigate. And so to say that he was looking for extra credit side quests with his own personal money, just out the goodness of his heart, because he's so concerned about systemic corruption in Oakland, it's really bad. I mean, I guess they had to give some kind of answer, but they might as well not have said anything. So I wonder what's going to happen next. That's the real question here.
Well, I can tell you, I have personal friends who are involved in Democratic Party politics here in California who were fully prepared to support Bonta for governor. And they had been working with Bonta before the announcement was supposed to happen. And they were trying to figure out just exactly what the structure of the campaign would be, those sorts of things. And I had talked to one particular friend quite a bit about it because this friend thought that Rob Bonta would be the front runner if Kamala Harris did not get in the race, and that Bonta would be the likely next governor of California. Electability was a big deal for this person. And the morning that it was announced in Politico that Rob Bonta was not going to run for governor, I saw it and I messaged her and said, "Oh, look, your guy's not going to get in the race after all." And she had no tip-off at all that that was coming. And this is not someone who just writes a $15 check and is a supporter in that way. I mean, this is a person who is going to be appointed to something. This is a person who is going to get something from him. And she and all of the other supporters were led to believe that this was a go and this was going to happen. And then all of a sudden one morning, he announces that he's not going to run. And as it turns out, we learn that that was at the same time that he starts hiring this law firm at $500,000. The timing is suspicious.
That's a lot of money to burn through in a short amount of time. So they build a significant amount of hours unless they charge, God knows what. But I will say there's also, in that same story, they mentioned the rumors are back that he may run for governor again. And I thought that was odd, considering this would hurt his chances, not help. I saw it as sort of a deflection or something to add to the headlines, because the headlines would not solely read about that and Rob Bonta running for governor, who's a very powerful person. That's the big headline if he's running, and I thought they were trying to maybe overshadow and water down the headlines about the legal fees and hope that they could just escape. But here's, I don't like passing the game of telephone, but since we're talking about sources, I've been told there's going to be an announcement very soon that he's being criminally investigated. Not an indictment, but an announcement that he's being investigated. That I've been told, don't be surprised if you find that out in the next couple of weeks.
And I assume
if that happens, he can't run.
Well, he's going to claim it's a political persecution, and he's going to try to use it to his advantage to either run for re-election or run for governor, because he's going to say it's Donald Trump targeting him for suing the federal government over and over and over again.
Well, I hope there's nothing on those videotapes or there's nothing incriminating with the Duong family that somebody's sitting on that will make that very difficult for him. Again, I have no sides or favors here. I would rather our local, elected officials not be dirty, but I also want accountability if they are. So only time will tell, and I guess it will tell very soon, whether or not Rob Bonta is involved with these bribery claims or any sort of corruption claims with the FBI.
I want to go back to a point you made earlier because I think it's an important one, and I think that we could learn a lot from it if we knew the answer to this question. Is there any way, and I guess she's no longer an elected official, so rules that used to apply to her no longer apply to her, but I would love to know who is paying for Sheng Tao's legal representation. Because if someone else is paying for her, then someone else has a say in what type of representation she gets, because he who pays the bills makes the rules. And if you're paying for the person that's advising her, you can say, hey, it would be a real good idea for her not to flip on certain people. So why don't you push her in that direction? And it's not necessarily a public defender where you don't have to write a check to this person and they're only supposed to look out for you. Because let's face it, if you're a criminal defense attorney, yes, your loyalty is to your client, but your loyalty is also to whoever it is that's paying your bill. She was a government employee who lived off of the salary that she made as mayor of Oakland. She did not own the house that she lived in. She's a renter. There's no generational wealth that she has access to. I would imagine that when she lost her job, her main source of income went along with it. Yet these bills are being paid. I think it's relevant to the conversation, whether or not we will ever know or we're entitled to know, I don't know. But it's relevant to the conversation to know who's paying for her legal expenses, because that could influence what they're telling her.
Absolutely. And I can tell you from having to defend myself against multiple restraining orders that I've been able to defeat, filed by my own government in the city of Oakland, lawyers add up. And my law firm was expensive, just like Jeffrey Sire is expensive, and I'm still in debt. And I have a job. So who's paying for these things? Lawyers are about as expensive as a service gets. And at this point, she's wrapping up hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. And I don't see the return on the investment for this. Think about who she's connected to. Again, this lawyer is connected to literally the first lady and congresswomen who are connected to Rob Bonta. This is what I mean by the California crime cabal. I believe that there's so much systemic fraud and corruption and just things that are overlooked that all of them have to protect each other, because every one of them is privy to enough information to take the other group down.
Last question before you go. What type of personal relationship did Sheng Tao and her boyfriend, who was, I guess, an unpaid advisor to her when she was mayor, who is also caught up in this criminal investigation, what was their personal relationship like with Rob and Mia Bonta?
I don't know. We see pictures in public events. That means nothing. So I wouldn't draw much from that, except for, getting some laughs out of it. But I do know that there was a very strong rumor that many people talked about, that Sheng Tao stood down from running for a state assembly in exchange for support for mayor. And that was a deal struck between the Bontas and Tao. That's all I know about the extent of their relationship.
Seneca Scott, founder of Neighbors Together Oakland and host of the Gotham Oakland podcast, which you can get over at YouTube. You can follow him on X at Seneca Speaks 21. Seneca Scott, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. Before I go, John, just so you know, Neighbors Together was actually shut down by Rob Bonta. That nonprofit is no longer active. So,
Bonta was the one that shut it down?
Yeah, go figure. My nonprofit was targeted. Out of all of these nonprofits getting millions of dollars in public money that goes missing, for some reason, my nonprofit was targeted for some lack of paperwork and summarily shut down when I was being the most vocal opponent against recalled Mayor Sheng Tao. You can do with that information what you will. But don't introduce me that way anymore. You may get me into some trouble if you think I'm still running a nonprofit. And I'm not Rob Bonta. I know you're listening. I'm not running it. It's not active.
All right. Seneca Scott, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you, John.
And Randy, we have time for one more addition to the California Crime Blotter.
It's happened yet again.
It's Wild Wild West out here.
It's the California Crime Blotter with John
and Randy.
And Randy, this one takes us to the video game store.
Video game store in Sacramento got robbed. For more, here's Fox 40.
Very disheartening for the folks here at the 1UP Retro Video and Game Store. They said considering this time of the year and also for the next 2 Saturdays, they do have events planned, which they will go forward with, thanks, they say, to the support from the community and also surrounding businesses.
Early in the morning, around 2 a.m., unfortunately, we got broken into.
Oh, my.
That sounded like a big explosion.
It happened here at the 1UP Retro Video Games at 2325 J Street. A Sacramento police forensic crime technician dusted for fingerprints at the back of the shop where the culprit broke in through a window, as well as a glass case which housed several pricey cards.
They did this for Pokemon cards.
Maybe the burglar said they were just chasing the mushroom because they wanted to get bigger.
The shop surveillance video shows the thief after breaking in, shatters glass in one display case, then breaks into another.
Just thrashed our card cases, stole the cards out of there. We just got a big restock yesterday of a bunch of sealed stuff, so unfortunately all that's gone. They wiped out all our card display, and they took a couple of our valued items, like a couple complete in-box games.
It's such a weird situation that we're in. We talked about this with the Air Jordans and now with the collector Pokemon cards. There is so much money being invested in collectibles.
Do you think the burglars were armed or they just hung out long enough to play duck hunt?
There were also Pokemon cards ranging from $100 to in the thousands of dollars.
That definitely took a hit on us just because, we are just a small business.
Despite their losses, they'll still host.
This business's whole savings was planning on selling that $12,000 Charizard.
Well, that's done.
Despite their losses, they'll still host a card show this Saturday.
Lucky enough, we have such a great community that they've been outpouring their love and their support to, and we're just blessed to have that type of supporting community within our area and neighborhood. It's especially tough for small businesses versus like a corporation where,
We've had Labubu's getting stolen. We've had Legos getting stolen. We've had shoes getting stolen. And we've had Pokemon cards getting stolen. How much of this crap is ending up on eBay?
Do you think they stole the Sega Genesis, too?
Maybe they can just shrug it off and it doesn't really matter. But for us, every bit is important.
Now, on the 29th, they will have an event celebrating their 5-year anniversary. They also set up a GoFundMe account, so if you would like to help the business recoup some of their losses from this burglary, you could find...
So they can buy different Pokemon cards? Or is it for the glass?
Who knows?
You can find that link by going to the story at fox40.com. Reporting live in Sacramento, covering local news that matters, Rowena Shaddix, Fox 40 News.
There you go. The video game store got robbed, and they didn't even take video games. No PS5s, no Nintendo Switch 2s, no Xbox Ones. They stole cards.
Well, they're just going to have to invest in really heavy items to sell, like pinball machines. They're going to go back to the future.
There you go.
Remember those old Street Fighter II games they used to have in the pizza parlors?
They usually have one of those inside these video game stores.
Oh, yeah. But it's a lot harder to play because when you're in the pizza parlor, all the grease from the pizza gets into the joystick and it's real easy to move.